Hi guys, welcome to the Reporters Roundtable, where we'll dive into the stories behind the stories as we sit down with the journalists who are shaping the narrative of Web3, blockchain, and the future of finance. From breaking news to in-depth investigations, these are the voices that bring clarity to the complex and ever-evolving world of crypto. We're here to explore not just the news they report, but also their journey, insights, and what drives them to cover this revolutionary space. And we are here with Sebastian Sinclair, Asia editor at Decrypt. Hi, Sebastian.
Hello, nice to be here.
So we're going to just start off by asking a couple of questions about your journey and your role to, where you are now.
Sure.
And then we'll kind of go down true into storytelling and maybe some more fun questions. So I suppose to start, you've had a really strong reporting career from CoinDesk and Blockworks and now serving as the Asia editor at Decrypt. Could you walk us through how you got to that point and what drew you into crypto and Web3 in the first place?
Sure. It's pretty interesting, actually. I started trading back in the height of 2017, thinking I could get rich quick off crypto, and basically failed miserably at it. After that, I basically had washed my hands with it until I saw a little ad on Twitter for CoinDesk looking for a markets reporter based in this time zone. So I went through the steps, and lo and behold, I was able to snag myself a job at CoinDesk back in 2018. And then from there, the journey sort of just evolved, really. I got to know people in the industry. Colleagues at CoinDesk were very supportive of the growth that I was making, and eventually I switched over to news. I think the fundamental point being there was that I had really strong editors, that just helped support my growth along the way, and that was able to provide me with the skills to get to my next job. Eventually, after 3.5 years, it was decided it was time for me to leave. I felt like I had pretty much run my course at CoinDesk and joined Blockworks for nearly 2 years, and basically covered everything from DeFi, Web3, NFTs, markets, business, you name it. I was pretty much on top of it, covering again in the Asia time zone, because they're always looking for people in Asia. It's very hard to find good writers in Asia. Eventually, it just sort of came to another conclusion as well, similar to CoinDesk. I felt like it was time to move on. And Decrypt was looking for an Asia editor, and I thought I'd try my hands at giving editing a go. And I haven't looked back since. It's been almost 2 years since I joined Decrypt, and working with a team of writers underneath me, getting to impart some of those skills and knowledge that I've learned along the way for young and upcoming writers has been a real privilege.
And how do you find editing as opposed to, the journalism role? Because I've done that move myself, and I know there's a lot of pros and cons. How do you personally feel about it? Do you still get to, obviously I see your articles, you still get to write and still get to, put that creativity out there, but how's that transition been?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do enjoy the editing side more these days, just because throughout my career I've written literally thousands of articles that at this point I feel as though it's time to give someone else an opportunity for a byline. I'm happy to sort of sit back in the shadows and help guide, certain angles and writers with particular pitches, keep the narratives moving forward. So I do very much prefer the editing side from the journalism side. I was always pretty shitty with networking as well, so it ended up working in my favor.
This is a lie. I've seen this man network. He's fell of the ball.
Yeah, thank you. So it also just gives me a bit more freedom over the story flows for the day and being part of the kind of process there at Decrypt in shaping what sort of coverage we should be hitting. I feel like that it allows me to implement some of my knowledge that I've gained from being in the industry for so long on what may click versus what might not. And otherwise those skills would be sort of left on the table. And
Yeah, and this isn't actually on my list of questions, but I want to hear a little bit more about this 2017, 2018 pivot into the crypto industry. I need to hear exactly what made you kind of think, okay, this is the move for me.
So it was interesting at that point, and sorry to get a bit dark, but my mother was basically very sick, and I was looking for avenues to make money to support her. And my friend had actually made something like 80K in profit during the 2016-2017 run-up, and I thought I could sort of reflect some of those gains myself and capture some of that for myself and for my mum, basically, to help her get better. Unfortunately, I only have $500 to my name at the time, and I got absolutely slammed in January 2018 when the markets came tumbling down just after Christmas at that time. And look, I had a degree. I have degrees in journalism and communications. So, it was only a natural sort of crossover when I saw the ad on Twitter through CoinDesk. I'd been reading their articles, obviously, to kind of try and understand and figure out the market moves, and, try to capture some alpha and figure out what the best tokens to trade are to make a quick profit. That I got to know the brand pretty well. And so, when I discovered the ad, the job ad, basically it just made sense to join or try my hand at journalism in crypto.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, but,
Not at all.
Interesting start into crypto for sure, and also, it's led to where you are now, so everything happens for a reason, probably.
Yes.
Okay, so what does the role of Asia editor mean in practice at Decrypt? What are your main responsibilities day to day? I know you really like editing, but how do you think about narrative across the region, and how is it different from other regions? Because I know, as you said, it's more difficult to find writers, so how does that kind of impact your job on a day to day?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think Asia is very much one of the silent partners in the big three regions of the Europe, US, and Asia, in a sense that EU and Europe get a lot of Europe and America get a lot of coverage, whereas there's a lot of powerful startups happening across the landscape in Asia that get left untold. And so I think it's important that we kind of keep a lens and a focus on the different projects that are happening here, just in order to understand, just how explosive the growth has been over the last 2 years, and where the capital and where the money is flowing. I mean, Indonesia is one of the largest and fastest countries for crypto adoption in the last sort of 3 years, based on various other metrics. Chainalysis did a report. You've got places like Thailand and Cambodia that are helping underbanked and underprivileged or underserved individuals kind of get back into the financial system and empower themselves. And I think that's an important story to tell. There's one that my freelancer Vince wrote about recently, which was personalized loans through a decentralized loan platform for students, allowing them to sort of borrow, on the blockchain, and they're able to fund basically most of their student activities at a pretty reasonable interest rate. And so, normally those loan applications might take a long time, or they might be denied through traditional banking rails simply because they didn't meet the requirements. So those kinds of stories, I think, are important to tell, and it also helps just to provide, to demonstrate the inclusivity.
Yeah, we actually read that, and what you said about Indonesia is very interesting, because our company retreat right after Token, when we met you guys, great time, was actually in Indonesia, and we noticed that there were, a massive uptake in people who are working in the crypto industry living in Indonesia, and a lot of clients had said similar things to us, like they had went there after Token. Why do you think it is? Like, why do you think, is it becoming like a new hub for crypto? And is there any reason behind it, in your opinion?
I think the economy speaks for itself by and large. The rupiah doesn't go very far. So, I think people look to park their wealth in alternative assets, like whether it be stable coins or traditional, alternative blue chip assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum. It kind of just provides a hedge against debasement, but also they've got an extremely large population as well. So per capita, I mean, as I said, they're the largest, the fastest growing region per capita. So, something like 230 million people across the archipelago there. Chances are there's going to be a higher adoption rate based on as opposed to a smaller nation like, say, Cambodia or Thailand. But I think people are looking to Asia as sort of the last sort of untapped region. As I said, the other areas have been the largest focus, for the longest time now since crypto started. Essentially, that I think a lot of capital is playing catch up and it's flowing into the region.
Do you have any predictions around that? Do you think maybe also kind of like if you were to predict a year into the future, do you see significant growth in the region? And also, do you think maybe, I know obviously areas like Indonesia, Thailand have had a big uptake in the whole digital nomad lifestyle in recent years. That's potentially kind of impacting the scale at which it's growing, or have you noticed more local adoption?
Definitely local adoption. I think the digital nomad narrative is an interesting one, but I think it's got to do with more local adoption. I think the pace of growth will be steady. We won't exactly see an explosive growth unless something completely crazy happens next year. We've already had the US elected president that's ushered in a kind of new digital golden age for crypto. Whether we see another type of catalyst like that remains to be seen, but I think from here on out it will be steady growth, and really just companies that prove themselves as a market fit are the ones that are going to be the key drivers for growth in that area.
Amazing. And I think covering crypto obviously means covering fast-moving markets like this, and with things that are so hard to predict because of all the shifting regulation, emerging technology, cultural change. What part of that mix do you find the most challenging and also the most rewarding?
From a regulatory standpoint, what's the most challenging? Is that the question?
In general, like from covering crypto, there's obviously a lot of regulatory issues. There's shifting regulation, fast-moving markets. Sure. What part of covering crypto in general do you find the most challenging and the most rewarding?
Yeah, right. So I think the differences of jurisdictional arbitrage, the different types of rules set up in different countries, I think can be tricky to follow, particularly in Asia. Some are aligned, like Singapore and Hong Kong. Others a bit more disjointed, like Thailand to Japan, let's say. Japan is very strict. Thailand has started clamping down. I think understanding the nuances for those different markets just allows you to kind of grasp the overall bigger picture on where we are in the regulatory race. But a lot of countries are playing catch up now, and I think that as it relates to Asia, that gap is narrowing. But as a reporter, it's particularly hard being across all of these different jurisdictions, and let's say just covering the US, where most of the policy comes out of Washington. Here in Asia, when we speak of Asia as a region, there are multiple countries involved, and so you have to be careful not to confuse and mix up different policies and say, oh, well, this one came out from Singapore, but no, that's right. No, it actually came out from Thailand last week, and making sure that you understand that you have that you're communicating the right information across the reader, because you don't want to confuse them, as confusing as it is for yourself.
And as confusing as it is for all of us, how would you recommend people seize the gap, I suppose, in terms of, the growth that we're going to see across Asia in the next couple of years, in terms of, the crypto market as a whole, if people were to explore that as an avenue?
Yeah, so I think understanding that what you're investing in, is it regulatory backed, is it sanctioned by a regulator, is it safe and compliant. Obviously we have the DeFi side of things, and the decentralized nature of crypto is all well and fine for those more advanced, but I would say for those navigating this space, particularly in Asia, particularly around new products like the ETFs, just make sure that they're registered with a compliant with a regulator, and that they're compliant. Ensuring that you avoid some of the pitfalls from new projects that could turn out to be potential scams. Because actually in Asia, I've found that there are quite a lot of scams in Asia that people need to navigate. So in order to close that regulatory gap over time and capture that growth, I think we need to clamp down on those scams. We need to just educate people in making the right investment decisions around which sort of products that are regulated versus the ones that aren't.
And also, I'd imagine it's quite important for companies as well to start thinking, long term as to how to, if their audience is, predominantly US, UK based at the moment, how to bridge that gap and enter the Asia market at a time when it's expanding quite rapidly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it all just comes down to licensure and keeping an eye on the developing frameworks. Australia in particular is starting to, under the Labor government, introduce measures to, demonstrate or illustrate to the world that they're kind of moving the needle and they're becoming more compliant, aligning with other regulations across various different jurisdictions. That make it harder for people who want to perform regulatory arbitrage to sort of stay in their lane and just to follow the rule of law, basically.
Yeah, and I suppose some areas like China, for example, have made big moves, obviously, with the adoption of the assets of just being able to pay via crypto. Do you think that you foresee a future in the near future, the distant future, where we're going to see more, mainstream crypto adoption to the point where people will be going into their local shop with a crypto card rather than a credit card or a bank?
Yeah, I think it's already happening now, right? Like Coinbase just released their own version of of their credit card on their own payment rails, on the payment rails of Visa, I think it was, or MasterCard, and so you can pay with crypto, you can get cash back. I think we're already starting to see that slowly. There was an interesting point where I saw someone saying it would be better if these cards were sort of just blank MasterCards without the Coinbase branding to sort of obfuscate the fact that they hold crypto, because that could make them a potential target. But there's discussion happening around it, which is great. I think that speaks volumes.
Do you ever see it overtaking mainstream? We've already seen cards starting to overtake cash. Do we ever think that we might get to a point where?
I think this is a hot take. It probably won't. It'll probably coincide with the current existing payment rails. I think that will complement the economy. It's hard for me. I've got a skeptical mind. I need that in journalism. So it's hard for me to see that it will overtake. But whether or not it marries with the existing traditional financial rails well enough that it's used on par or slightly less, I think that's still a huge win for the crypto industry. And I think that's still an important story to be a part of. Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely get the skeptical mind thing. Like, journalism background, I agree with you. But it's always interesting to hear people's opinions on these things as they're kind of developing and all the, the new developments. But given that you declare, we've talked just a bit about crypto holdings there. So I think you declare that you've no significant crypto holdings since 2017 or 2018. I would assume. How do you think that affects your approach to reporting in the space? Do you think it makes a difference to impartiality, or is that just a personal choice? And do you think it's important for journalists to declare these things? Because I really actually like the Decrypt method of just...
Yeah, so this is an interesting question that is tossed around in the newsrooms. Since I've been a part of discussions at CoinDesk, Blockworks, and now Decrypt around disclosure. I think it's important for any reporter to get their hands on small amounts of the crypto, toy around with the chains, figure out how a bridge works, how swaps work, derivatives. You need to dabble, you need to experiment in order to be able to write about it, to be able to speak confidently about it. But to hold significant amounts, it's really up to the individual reporter as long as they disclose it. I don't see a conflict of interest. If the writer is aware of it somewhere in their bio, that this person is writing about Bitcoin and they hold a significant amount of Bitcoin, as long as the article's impartial, it's fair, it's balanced, and their amounts are disclosed, then it's not problematic.
Yeah, no, I agree. As I said, I admire the fact that Decrypt has a section to tell you the holdings of the journalist, because I think, it's something that's nice for people to be able to take into account when reading the stories. But, okay, so when you're deciding what story to cover or which angle to pursue, what criteria do you use? How do you balance between breaking news versus deeper investigative? I would love if my words would work today. Investigative or explanatory pieces.
Good one. You got it. That's an interesting question. I think I don't follow. Something that was said to me a long time ago was, does it move the markets? Now, that's the assessment you make on any piece or any story that comes across your way. It's like, well, this is a really cool project and they're doing amazing things, but are people going to care? Are people going to immediately buy Bitcoin based on, this kind of story being released to the public today? Probably not. So is it worth telling? Hell yeah. But that might be needed for another day, where you sit down with the project founders, you sort of run through, their journey, the story, and turn it into a feature. But the nature of breaking news is really necessitated, now I'm butchering my words, by the fact of whether or not it moves the market. And I think that's an important distinction to make for any kind of comms or PR person when they're pitching editors. Is this going to be big enough to capture a wide enough audience for people to, and are people going to click on it? Because at the end of the day, journalists are hungry for stories, yes, but we don't want to do a disservice by putting out, PR fluff. We want to fact check the press releases. We want to fact check the quotes. We want to deep dive into the stats behind a particular metric or a particular sector in the crypto economy that makes it interesting, that could be framed in a way that's important in the context of the reader. And so I always just have that in my frame, in my mind's eye. Does it move markets? Is it going to matter tomorrow? A lot of the times the answer is no. And, we all journalists get inundated with crappy pitches, and it's no fault of anyone's. There's no shaming here. I think everyone has a job to do. But those are sort of the things I look at when I'm deciding on how to split it out to something more of a long form feature, or something that needs to be hit quickly for news, breaking news.
No, I think that's really insightful. In terms of the stories behind the stories, could you talk about maybe one piece that you worked on recently where the story turned out quite different from what you had initially anticipated, or, from the initial narrative, and what you learned from that experience?
Yeah, one we were working on was, again, going back to this loan story from the Philippines. It was interesting because it was pitched to us as, as though it was an extremely low interest rate for students to get their hands on. And when we wrote the piece initially, it came out very close to, or like it was very on the nose with how they had angled it and wanted us to write the story. And I sort of went back to my writer and said, I'm not happy with how this is written out. I'm not happy how we framed it. I think we're basically regurgitating their narrative. Let's dig a little bit of deeper and figure out under the hood how this all works, and sort of how they arrive at their interest rate, which was actually kind of a little bit higher than say a normal loan that's usually accessible to everyone. In this case, people weren't able to access loans in the Philippines because they've been shut out of the banking network. But when we dug deeper, we sort of compared interest rates for these loans across other jurisdictions like the US and Europe, and we found that actually this is actually quite high, and it wouldn't make a lot of sense to sort of borrow this capital to fund your student debt in the long term. It's very much of a short-dated loan, if you will. And so without digging deeper, I think the story would have just came out on face value, how they had pitched it. But as any journalist will tell you, our job is to take that information, distill it down into something that is, essentially unbiased, or as close as unbiased as we can be, and tell a story how we think it should be told and what we're seeing, which has its own biases, of course, but based on what we were seeing with these high interest rates across other jurisdictions and comparing it to what this loan was offering, we found it was like suboptimal.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think that approach in general. I remember I had a journalism professor who said to me when we were really worried about being, unbiased in first year of journalism. Well, is it your job as a journalist to, if it's raining outside, interview two people, one person, two weather people, one who doesn't think that it's raining and one who does think that it's raining? Or is it your job to do those interviews and then look outside the window, put your hand out and see, is it raining? And I think that is, something that as a journalist, it's important for you guys to do, because obviously you can interview people and speak to people as much as you want, but at the end of the day, we can only be as unbiased as the checks and balances that we do, and
it's a very good point, and one that I think just when I sort of build relationships with communicators, reporters, public relations professionals. Excuse me, now I'm losing my ability to speak. I try to inform them and let them know that that's how I'm thinking about stories, because they obviously have their own job. They get mandates from the higher ups. Hey, this is how we want to frame the story. This is how we want to sell it to customers. and then they put out a press release based on the project's, win on the day. And then I say to the professional, like, listen, we need to be able to distill this information down, provide our own lens onto it, because as it stands, it's not really newsworthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't worry about the butchering of public relations professionals. I should start adapting that, because I've been mocked enough over the Irish accent with the way I say Pior. So
Pior.
Pior. Yeah, the guys really went into that over the weekend. So, but how do you handle complexity in general? I suppose we've talked a lot about that, but when you're writing for an audience that may include crypto insiders, newcomers, what techniques are you using to make it clear and compelling? Like, are there any recurring myths that you've seen that you dread having to bust, and how do you approach that kind of side of things? Because I know we've talked about having to explain these things to pure professionals, but having to explain them to, the average person is probably just as difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you always have it in your mind. I think it was told to me a long time ago, write for the most stupidest person in the room. And that's not to say, that's not a put down. I think you just need to simplify language, particularly when it comes to the crypto industry, particularly when it comes to certain Web3 protocols, certain blockchains, certain chains that like L2s, L1s, being able to explain the difference in concise, tight language is very important. So breaking down those concepts, obviously, can open up the page, if you will, to a lot more readers, and it just allows people to feel more included. And smart. You want to be able to give someone something when they walk away from reading a piece, like they feel like they're a bit smarter, or they're a bit more knowledgeable, having learned what they learned. The only way you can do that is by effective communication. And so it's not easy. I think just I find myself still having to research old concepts that I learnt years ago, and they crop up again, and I'm like, oh yeah, what was that again? I swear I knew what that meant. Because it is so complex, it is so technically minded, that in the end you have to be educating yourself along the way too, in order to be a good educator or a communicator of those kind of heady concepts.
And are there any of those crypto Web3 myths that you see crop up time and time again, that you almost sigh when you see them, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to go and write about this and take the offensive?
No, there's nothing that really springs to mind. I mean, maybe because I'm drawing blanks in my own mind. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I'm not really sure how to answer that right now, but I'll have to get back to you. Let's table it.
Table it. Okay. Got it. Okay. Easier question. As we look ahead, how do you personally stay ahead of the curve in this fast-moving space? What are your go-to sources, habits, principles that allow you to spot what's coming rather than what's happened? Kind of proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah. So networking, I think, is really important. I've had a couple of tip-offs in the last couple of weeks, just through people I've met through networking. That allows me to sort of get ahead of, today. The Australian government the Australian securities regulator released updated guidance around stablecoins and custody. I wouldn't have known that was going to hit the wires unless I had someone tip me off. So that's really one way to stay ahead. The other one, I think, is consume as much as you can. Read the news sites, not just the trade publications like ours, but the mainstream media has started to do a fairly good job. I'd say they're a lot better than they used to be. They were very dismissive, but now the information provided therein isn't valuable. You get to learn. And I think just sort of being in certain communities within a project, whether you're obsessed with Solana or Ethereum, immersing yourselves in the Discord chats, networking digitally is also vastly important as well.
So given you cover markets and policy, and we've just talked a little bit about, mainstream media, when you look the next 12 to 18 months in crypto and Web3, what are the biggest story risks, things that might blow up that you think the mainstream media should be, starting to watch now?
I think the narrative around digital asset treasuries is a little bit concerning, just because regulation is a little opaque in those areas, and I'm not sliding any particular company. I think it's kind of an interesting concept, funding vehicle, and a way for investors to get exposure outside of holding coins and the ETFs. But there is sort of a regulatory overhang there that I think, if certain companies were deemed to not be providing goods and services anymore, and all they did was accumulate certain tokens, then I think that can become problematic. Especially when prices start to decrease in the next bear cycle. It could really add a lot of volatility and pressure to the market, and that might be triggered by certain regulatory developments in a particular country where one of those DATs are housed. That I think that maybe all of a sudden it could be quite problematic.
And I suppose you've recently covered a bit about this, and also about how institutional capital is increasingly driving crypto markets. How do you see that shift playing out in Asia? What do you think that means for retail participants or small market actors?
I think not just in Asia, but more broadly, with the introduction of ETFs, with the introduction of DATs, even gaining exposure to mining companies, I think retail investors have a lot of options these days, as well as institutions. I think there's been a lot of emphasis over the last 18 months around institutional adoption, and it has been here. It's been coming. You can see, the cumulative flows in Bitcoin ETFs, the spot Bitcoin ETFs, for example, have been up and to the right, as Bitwise was adamant on pointing out to me at Token 2049 in Singapore this year. But basically, I think that slowly over time, if people are exposed and they have some portion of their portfolio parked in crypto, then I think that the growth will continue. I could be wrong, and this is obviously not financial advice. This is just a hunch and what I've been told from many professionals in the industry, that it's a slow process where much of the volatility has been stripped away. Although, having said that, $19 billion in leverage was just wiped out the other day, so perhaps not. Yeah. But the experts would have you believe that volatility is being compressed, that we're kind of heading into this new era of a more stable crypto market. And, particularly as these institutions do continue to come on, volatility should compress more and more, just because more people are holding it. There's a larger amount of capital there to sort of steady the ship. That's just based on what I've been told. I see it continuing to increase this year, and well into the next year.
I mean, I wasn't even going to touch on that, but I remember waking up and at the team retreat, and everybody was freaking out because, so much crypto had been lost overnight after such a bullish kind of time period, especially.
It was wild.
It was wild. I think things are starting to kind of stabilize now, but what do you think, in your personal opinion, that kind of such like a landslide like that means for, long-term crypto adoption? Do you foresee it putting people off? Do you foresee it kind of scaring people, or the opposite? People are going to buy in because of the belief of what is.
Yeah, that's a good question, Clara. I think the herd quote unquote, will always follow the highest prices, right? Look at what happened with gold. There's been a line outside the bullion gold centres in the middle of Sydney here, from mum and pop investors that are buying gold at all-time highs. I think that will continue. Eventually, with a $19 billion wipeout, I think that kind of event does deter the people that are already involved. For those outside of crypto, it's like a blip on the radar. They probably didn't even know it happened. I've got a friend that holds it, that he had no clue that event had occurred, and he doesn't consume crypto media. He doesn't understand any of the blockchains. He just holds a bit of Bitcoin, and he's like, "Oh, was there a rough day in crypto? Was there?" And I had to explain to him what happened. I think moments like this really just reinforce, if you're involved in the industry, and you have been for a long time, like I have, this is just another day. It was one of the largest liquidation events in crypto history, but because a lot of options and derivatives have come online recently, there's been a lot of decentralized exchanges experimenting with perps, for example, that it kind of opens up the floodgates for leverage, and that can have.
We've seen
What's
so
that?
much.
Sorry,
I was just gonna say, so much growth on the other side. If things keep reaching an all-time high, there's bound to be, what goes up must come down eventually. So
yeah.
It's not too big of a deterrent.
No, I think people just need to zoom out if you are concerned about what happened and what could be happening in the short term. I always try to look at things with a long-term mindset. I hold a bit of gold. I think long-term, I'm not going to sell it until I'm 60. These types of things. If I were to get back into crypto, it would be for the same thing. I'm only not holding crypto because of my own personal belief that it clashes with my ability to be editorially independent. But if I were, I would be holding it for the long term, and I wish I was. People might make fun of me listening to this, but I think I should have held and not sold in 2018. I would probably be not doing journalism. I'd be sipping coconuts on a beach in Koh Samui or somewhere like that. So
it's the nature of the industry. It's really, take those hits. It's a lot easier when you're further along in the industry and you're a seasoned investor with, a couple of 100,000 behind them, than if you are making your first investment with 500 in your bank account and there's people relying on you. It's a lot easier said than done not to pull out at that point.
Yeah.
So I think, and we're grateful that you're in journalism. So
thank you. That's a nice comment to say. I think just if for people listening, just don't discount your own ability to psych yourself out. I think having a strategy, sticking to that strategy is important. Investing measured amounts each time, at a set time each month or every quarter, or however you like to do it. It's probably the safest and most stable way to invest in anything, really, particularly when you're unsure about the volatility.
And when you talk to builders, investors, regulators in Asia, but also just globally, what cultural or regional nuances do you see that don't translate into the US, Europe-centric crypto narratives that are kind of going on right now? And how do you kind of bridge those and bring those into your writing?
Well, I guess I can sort of answer this question with one of the nuances, particularly with PR firms and communicators, even developers and investors. in Asia is a lot of the times it needs to go through multiple checks. So if I'm interviewing someone for a story or getting their opinion or quote that I would like to put in, I think, oh, that's really cool insight. Can I use that? And a lot of the times, Asia firms will want to go through a team of lawyers that will then go through the comms department, that will then go to the executives for final check off before it comes back to me. And by that time, it's like 48 hours have passed and the news has moved on, that I find it kind of challenging. Whereas in Asia, whereas in Europe and the US, it's a lot more straightforward. People are willing to talk to you. You know, there's less tension there, particularly in Hong Kong as well. I think, you know, just because of, you know, the overlap with mainland China is there's sometimes can be a bit of discomfort about talking about certain things, you know, as it relates to their project and kind of the larger narrative at play with China, and yeah, there's tension there, but generally speaking, I would say it's not just exclusive to that particular region in Asia. I find a lot of firms and a lot of people across Asia are a little bit more cagey. So you just got to tease it out of them. Let them know that you're not their enemy. Nothing needs to be printed, which is said to you if they explicitly request so. I always go above and beyond to honor my sources' privacy, and to make sure that, you know, also that they're not being misquoted. And if they don't want a particular thing said in a piece, then I'm of the belief that I try to make sure all parties involved are happy, not just me looking for a quick win.
I think that's great, and I think that puts a lot of people's mind at ease. So I think I can go on to the last few questions, because I know I've had you for a very long time. But I suppose, what are your predictions for the future? Everybody's talking about, you know, how fast-paced everything is right now with AI and everything else. How do you think that's going to impact not just the crypto industry, but even journalism as a whole in the future?
Yeah, this is a question I've been grappling with lately, and I talk a lot about it amongst my friends. I think with the advance of AI, the important thing to note about being a journalist at this time is you need to make sure you have your sourcing and your networking down pat, because when, you know, the algorithms start writing the stories for us, or rather the LLMs or even AGI, artificial general intelligence, starts assuming those positions and making cognitive choices about, you know, which story should fit a news cycle and which shouldn't. I think that is particularly scary. But, like, you know, until it grows legs or is inserted into a robotic, you know, form, then humans still have the edge. So in the immediate term, or even in the midterm, I would say 5 years out, I think network, make sure that you're able to, you know, get stories that no one else has, so that the LLMs can't crawl, and sort of take that and write the story ahead of you. I think that's the biggest prediction for me, is that yes, AI is going to come for a lot of jobs. Governments aren't prepared for it. Regulation's not in place, and there are a lot of doomsayers. I think that, you know, innovation for the sake of everything else, or at the sake of everything else, is a dangerous precedent that we're setting. And I don't want to be a doomer, but it's hard not to when you have companies that are valued at hundreds of billions of dollars, forging ahead with limited guardrails and limited regulation. It's a recipe for disaster.
I mean, we are getting closer to AI inside robot bodies as well, so even at that point, we don't know how long we have anymore with any of this stuff, so I think we can just hope the best.
Yeah, may as well just give up, go live on a beach somewhere, go surfing.
Make yourself so doing now, you know, pretend it's
yeah, exactly. Just give up. Let them win. They can have it.
Okay, if we're going to be more optimistic, what is your dream interview as a journalist before the AIs replace us all, me and you? If you could interview one person for a full hour, no limitations, who would it be? And, you know, obviously don't say me because we've just had this hour. So, you know, anybody in the crypto space that you look up to, or it doesn't even have to be in the crypto space, just one person you'd love to get an hour in with and be able to do research. And
yeah, I think it's not someone that I've looked up to. It's someone that I've been aware of for a long time. And look, Coinbase's CEO Brian Armstrong is someone that springs to mind that I think would be really interesting. Sort of pick his brain, you know, about his own story, how he arrived there, where he sees the industry going. It seems like we're more and more marrying into traditional finance and sort of moving away from the crypto ethos that was originally envisioned all those years ago. I would love to pick his brain on where he sees crypto now, and and sort of, you know, ask him those kind of critical questions on whether he feels as though he's played a part in marrying crypto with traditional finance, because he has been so heavily involved in pushing for the Genius Act on stablecoins. He wants to do. He's saying a lot of positive stuff this week and last week about the crypto markets infrastructure bill. That, you know, I just want to ask him, you know, do you feel partially responsible for pushing crypto further away? And that's a loaded question, and I don't mean it to. I'd probably have to frame it a lot better, but just, do you feel somewhat like you've played a part in getting us here to this stage in crypto where it looks vastly different than what perhaps Satoshi might have envisaged all those years ago?
Thank you again, Sebastian. Obviously, if you want to share your email or any details again where people can find you, please feel free. Thanks again, Sebastian, for your time. You were incredible. Thanks.